20 years ago, a short-term project at Midway Manufacturing led to the creation of one of today's most prolific game series, Mortal Kombat. In celebration of Mortal Kombat's 20th anniversary, we set out to find as many of the original members of the cast and crew who worked on the first game, including Ed Boon, John Tobias, Dan Forden, John Vogel, Carlos Pesina, Daniel Pesina, Hosun Pak, and more. Our story begins in Chicago, Illinois, both at NetherRealm Studios, where many of the original team members still work, and at Chicago Wushu, the martial arts studio owned and operated by Daniel Pesina, and where we met up with John Tobias.
I primarily did all the art and animation, and John Vogel did our backgrounds. I would sketch them out and he would actually do the construction of them.
I had just finished working on the Terminator 2 arcade game, the Terminator 2 movie arcade game, and needed a place to go, needed something to work on. So I asked John Tobias and Ed Boon, if they had a place for me on. They were just starting a new project. We didn't know what it was yet exactly, but I asked if they had a place for me. I'd love to join them and do some stuff. And they said, yeah, we'd totally love to have you on our team. So it was really just, we were in test mode at that point to see what a fighting game could be like.
The first thing I thought of was an old game that I had played called Karate Champ. I played the hell out of that when I was in high school. That game only required 2 characters on screen at a time, and so I thought that was sort of the perfect opportunity for us to create a fighting game like that, and it would only require the 2 characters on the screen, which would let us have the larger characters. So that's kind of what was the initial idea behind Mortal Kombat. And then I went to Ed with that idea, and he was, I think, working on Super High Impact. It was a football game. Right after that, the Van Damme thing came about because our licensing guy at the time was approached by a movie studio with the Universal Soldier license. Van Damme was kind of starring in that movie at the time. And we were more interested in him as sort of a martial arts movie star who would either play himself or play a character in the game. That didn't work out for whatever reasons, and that character ultimately became Johnny Cage.
Initially, John and Ed wanted to do a Van Damme licensed product because at the time, Terminator 2 had just come out. We just finished it. It was a big deal. Licenses were a big deal at that point. And so they wanted to do a fighting game with big characters.
We were trying new stuff, with the whole big characters, digitized characters, seeing really cool stuff happen. It was very small in production. I don't know how much it was really kind of being expected for the game. We really had just 4 guys, literally 1 programmer, myself, and 2 artists and a sound guy.
I'd never done a fighting game before. I don't think there weren't even that many fighting games around at that point. I think Street Fighter was maybe one of the only ones, maybe Pit Fighter.
When we were trying to obtain Van Damme as a license, Street Fighter 2 was released in the arcades, I think right around March or April, and was performing really well. And so where we originally thought we needed a license to kind of justify to our management the idea behind the game, once Street Fighter 2 was performing well in the arcades, I think that they saw that and saw that a fighting game can earn well. That's what ultimately allowed us to kind of start the game.
When John came up with the idea of this Mortal Kombat game where it's a tournament on some island and used references from martial arts movies to come up with the whole theme of this game. And we did a test version of the first character, which was Johnny Cage. It was Dan Pesina. And he's big on the screen, he would fight and stuff, and that was what we showed the higher-ups at Midway to say, this is what we want to do. And just those 2 Johnny Cages fighting each other, basically, is what it was.
We didn't actually start working on the game for months after that. There was, I was working on Total Carnage, and Ed was working on his football game, and I don't think we actually started development on Mortal Kombat until maybe September, October of '91. And then actual development, maybe even not until November.
I had such a great time. It was really a pivotal point in my life.
I'm Johnny Cage.
Bonded with a bunch of friends making a game. It was awesome. It was a good time.
My name is Ho-Sung Pak. I am an actor in real life. I play a character named Liu Kang, and Liu Kang is a Shaolin monk, and his sole purpose is to defeat Shang Tsung, which, ironically, the character I also played, Shang Tsung. I've been in the Turtle films, and I'm filming right now in Hong Kong with Jackie Chan.
I cannot believe that it's been 20 years since we've done Mortal Kombat. It blows my mind. It feels like a few years ago. It's great in a way that it's been 20 years and people still play it and remember it. And in a way, wow, blink of an eye, 20 years goes by.
We were just having fun, you know, we're all young guys just having a great time and loving what we do, and that includes, you know, Ed and John and the actors and everybody else like Vogel, just loving what you're doing, and then it eventually becomes this, you know, great hit or a monster of a hit, and you're in just a different world altogether at that point, you know. From going to fun to like, wow, I made a career of this, people know, you know, some people know who I am, and you know, my eyes aren't glowing. I don't have the hat carrying that around going, hey, it's me. It's a great feeling, and the fans are just fantastic.
First time I met John, we were going to the forest to do a martial art movie. And we're driving around this road, and we're kind of a little bit lost, and we're going to make a left-hand turn into a preserve park. That's where we're going to set up everything up, and we're just going to shoot it on the fly, get some fighting done, and just go back and edit it. We're making a turn, and this other guy decides to try to pass us at the same time, hits John, destroys the camera, destroys his car.
Oh no.
And so I got to know John because we spent like 2 or 3 hours out in the middle of Fort Peter waiting to get picked up because everything was wrecked. You know, it was myself, John, Rich, and my brother Carlos.
My brother did martial arts early on in his life. He was probably about 14, 15. Obviously, I was 9 years younger, couldn't do it until I was 11. He got me into that, and then eventually to branch off into the Mortal Kombat realm, we mutually knew John Tobias, and him and Ed had an idea. They came in and, you know, pitched it to us, and we were like, oh, this would be awesome for us to do. The
taping, I think the first character we taped was Johnny Cage, so Danny had come in, and we worked him pretty good. He was kind of put through the ringer because we didn't really know what we were doing, and so a lot of it was experimental. But by the time we got to some of the later characters, it was, you know, we kind of already knew what to do in terms of how to pose them.
John and Ed met me and they were like, okay, we're going to record you. So we walked into the studio space, like a storage room. We had the light set up because naturally if you're filming and you move the light, the shadow's different, and you had to refilm everything. When he tried to match it up, oh, guess what? The camera was a few inches closer, so you're much smaller. So all of a sudden you're throwing a kick, you go back into position, all of a sudden you're bigger, just because the camera is in the same position. So slowly, we learned to mark spots up and kind of make out a square where we should move around.
Daniel, myself, and Richard, we had been friends at the time for like 7, 8 years, for a while at that point. We've been practicing martial arts for a long time together. And Daniel said, yeah, I think we're doing a martial arts video game thing. It's just gonna be something small and little. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, let's have fun. Daniel and I collaborated, like he wanted some different things, I think in terms of technique-wise, so that every character looked a little bit different.
It was a long day, you know, having the guys, you know, repeat the same move so many times, saying, you know, can you reach out a little bit further, a little bit lower, a little bit, you know, aim for this target and all that stuff. It was very, you know, those guys, they didn't realize, the actors didn't realize, you know, what it was going to look like, what our vision was for the game. So they felt kind of silly doing some of the things, you know. You're sitting on stairs and pretending like you're doing an air punch, and they felt kind of silly. And so our thing was we had to keep reassuring them, no, it's going to be really cool.
You weren't 100% sure, you know, how is this going to, is it going to be really cheesy, it's going to be funny? But I thought when we were doing the movements and we were going through all the whole process, that it would be very cool. And John Tobias is a great artist. So whatever he did, I was certain that it was going to turn out to be great.
When we started Mortal Kombat 1, when we actually started the taping process, we advanced to a higher grade camera and used high-8 tape. So the quality was a little bit better than it was initially. I remember there was a point in time where I thought that maybe the way to go was to kind of almost do a rotoscoping of the actors, so I would videotape them and then sort of draw over completely the characters, but there just wasn't time to do any of that stuff.
You know, we were grabbing stuff that we weren't even, you know, gonna have nearly enough memory to, you know, we had characters walking out on the screen and bowing to each other and doing all these kind of elaborate things. And, you know, with big sprites, you only have, that stuff takes up a lot of memory, at least for what we have back then. So we had to remove all that stuff, but we had people walking on treadmills and bowing and doing all these kind of elaborate, fancy victories that we had. Everything had to be trimmed down.
You know, Danny, Carlos, and Rich and Ho-Sung Pak were you know, experienced martial artists, and so those guys had no problem. You know, you'd ask them for a kick and they'd throw you 50 different kicks. You know, they had no problem doing that kind of stuff. I remember having a little bit of a struggle with Rich. I don't know, it was a kind of a communication problem. Danny was actually with us during his tapings and would kind of, you know, explain to him, no boop like this, you know, because he had already kind of been through it.
The thing that really kind of made it come to life is we just went in and started recording these vocal reactions for when you attack and when the characters get hit, and that was a ton of fun. And as soon as Ed programmed that stuff in the game and we got the reactions from the hits and like the uppercut and all that stuff, it was just hilarious, just like how over the top all the VO was. You know, it was like one of those things that just everything seemed to come together. I mean, Ed said a couple times, you know, when we got like the uppercut, and so we've got this big sound, we've got the animation, we've got the dude flying in the air, you got a blood splatter happening and the screen shakes. Like all those things work together. It's like, whoa, we got something. That's when we knew that, okay, this could be pretty cool.
When cool stuff started getting on the screen, people were coming into our offices, and there was like this very much of a kind of underground swelling of excitement throughout the company, you know, especially after we tested, then it became really crazy.
You knew it was something big even before we went on test. And then that proved itself further. It's like when we actually did go to the local arcades in Chicago, when there still were, you know, arcades to go test at, you know, just seeing people just, you know, freaking out and, you know, literally running around the, you know, after they saw a fatality, like literally just, you know, running away from the machine and like freaking out. It was huge.
Our first weekend test was in a black cabinet. There was no cabinet artwork yet. I was, I think, in the middle of kind of doing, you know, designing the cabinet artwork. But it was rolled out in a black cabinet with a Xerox copied marquee. And it was tested the way we tested all our products, which was, you know, you just kind of roll it into the arcade and flick it on and just wait, you know. And I remember the first weekend test, Ed and I were there, you know, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday all day long at Times Square Arcade, actually right over here on Broadway and Clark. And we just watched the players walk up, and, you know, you watch them put the first couple of tokens in the machine and take it from there. And we knew by the end of that weekend that we had something special, just because of the crowds that would form around it. And you'd have sort of the Street Fighter players, you know, crowded around their machine, because at the time Street Fighter was, you know, was right in its heyday, and they would sort of slowly start to wander over to Mortal Kombat and start to throw the tokens in, and by the end of that weekend, Street Fighter 2 was, you know, had a couple of players, and we had like a crowd of 25. I remember I had a key to the machine, and I remember going to the machine and opening the coin box, and just tokens spilled out, and I was amazed. And so the guy who ran the arcade came over, and, you know, he was kind of shocked, but, you know, he knew that the game was getting played, and so we kind of picked up all the tokens, and I remember being on my knees in the arcade scraping tokens out of the bottom of the machine. And we went over to the machine and you know, to their coin counter and counted them up. And I remember, I think I called up Ed from the arcade and said, you know, the game earned like $1,000, you know, and it was amazing.
You know, when people found out about this thing called a fatality, there were people, I remember going to the arcade, and, you know, there'd be someone, I'd be just watching the game, there'd be someone that would come in the door and ask, like, where's this Mortal Kombat game? You know, like the word was on the street, and all we are is on test. But they want to come and see this thing. Where's this game where you can rip a guy's heart out? That was really when we started to figure out we might be onto something big. But we really didn't know how big. And this is before the days of internet and chat rooms and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we didn't really have any feedback other than actual sales of games. Once, you know, we started getting the sales of games, wow, this thing's selling a lot. That was really our only feedback, as far as I could tell. We didn't really know the fan culture that was starting, you know, that was brooding and cultivating itself. That was all very hidden to me anyway. I didn't really see any of that. Now you can't get away from that. If a game comes out, you know how big it is by watching the message boards and and seeing things online.
It was doing gangbusters, and people really, I mean, they lined up to play the game. I remember going to an arcade and having to play like 50 kids, and I had to stay, whether I won or lost, I had to stay. And of course the kids were really good, and I was just mediocre at the game. But yeah, and at that point you knew that there was something to the game that was going to be pretty exciting.
The first time I saw my head being popped off by myself, because I was the only characters, there was only one character they were experimenting with. Oh, you're going to pop off your own head. I was like, oh, sweet. When I saw it, I looked at John, he was like, it's cool, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so.
The violent aspect of Mortal Kombat I never really thought twice about. We were just trying to do things to pull a reaction out of the players.
I remember John saying, let's have Sub-Zero grab the guy's head and pull out and show the spine going, just like in Predator. Had the actors do the stuff and put it in the game and added all the effects, and everybody was so 100% on the side of, you can't take this out of the game, you have to have it in the game. I was like, oh, we got to do the, pull the heart out, show it to him before he dies, that cliche thing.
When we worked on the first game, the demographic that we were designing the product for was sort of the arcade crowd. And actually back then, the arcade crowd tended to be a little bit older. I think they were college-age players, older teens. Once Acclaim got involved and did the translation to the home platforms, obviously the players tended to skew younger. And so, when the whole violence controversy blew up, and the remedy for that ultimately was the rating system, I thought that was entirely appropriate. But we were making the transition from Mortal Kombat 1 to 2 when that was going on, when the Senate hearings were happening and stuff, and we were just kind of busy cranking away on the next game. And we were kind of shielded from all that nonsense by, I think, both Acclaim and probably management at Midway. We never really had much to do with that at all.
So we were so busy working on our next version of the game while all that stuff was happening that I personally feel like I missed, the big hoopla of the Mortal Kombat,
right.
all that commercial and Acclaim stuff. And I remember them at CES putting a videotape into a machine and showing us the TV commercial and just being like blown away. Like I was saying to John, they're making a TV commercial for our game, a television commercial. And they were saying, yeah, we're going to air it on, these big events. I don't know if it was the Super Bowl or something like that, but, and just warning them, like saying, don't put too much money on this. It can't, it's not going to be that big. But, I've always credited Acclaim as they were the ones who recognized this as, we can make this a phenomenon. They put $10 million behind it, and you really got to credit them for raising it to a much more mass commercial level.
I had no idea that it was going to become what it became. And I honestly thought that we were going to crank out this 8-month project and then we were going to move on. And that would be the end of it. So yeah, I never thought that, that it would obviously build to what it built to. At this time, there's a whole generation of players who probably weren't even born when the first game came out.
Mortal Kombat was and still is like this kind of crazy ride. I would have never guessed, in 1992, that in 2012 we would still be making games and they would still be selling in the millions. And so I'm really proud of that. It's amazing that there's a lot of players who are playing this game who the series is older than they are. So I think it's a big accomplishment.
It's cool for me to be able to touch people's lives in whatever way that is, whether it's because of Toasty or because of, the music and the sounds that I've done, that people have been able to enjoy that. And a lot of people have gotten inspired by the game and have wanted to go on and either write music or get involved in video games. I mean, it's been kind of a powerful cultural phenomenon. I feel like I'm just lucky to have been a part of it.
For 20 years we have these die-hard fans who know, every, storyline and every nuance about the characters that I totally appreciate. I think that's amazing. So it's one thing we never take for granted.
Don't be afraid. Need help? Come see me.
I'm thankful for the fans. That's why I'm here, more or less. And it's why we do the things we do, and we love doing these things for them. And it's also one of those things that you're involved with more or less and you love, and then just everybody else around likes what you like, and I'm just thankful and blessed for this opportunity. And hopefully it'll keep going for another 20 years.
And thanks for playing the game, and thanks for being a fan. I appreciate it. It was a whole lot of fun making it, and I hope you guys continue to play the game and follow the people in Mortal Kombat.